I know there's a lot going on in our world. There's a lot going on in our hearts. But I'm so grateful that we're all taking the time to be here and to sit virtually with each other. You know, the days are getting shorter and darkness lingers all around us, physically and metaphorically. And as someone who grew up around the equator, I grew up in Ghana, West Africa, changing seasons and light patterns are somewhat foreign to me. You know, I was used to regularity and consistency, so this part of the year always unsettles me. And I mean, what am I supposed to do with a dark sky at 4 p.m. in rainy Boston? It's tough. It's tough, I must say, you know, but we're managing. But in many ways, Advent feels similar. Our regular cadence has changed, and now we're in a period of darkness, spiritual darkness, as it were. We're in a period of contemplation, of sorrow, and for some, we're in a period of despair. And in the midst of all this, we are told to practice the spiritual art of hope, of patience, of waiting, and looking for a certain redemption of our bodies, of our souls, and even of our world. But I'm sure you would agree with me that waiting is never fun. And you know, as someone who hates waiting, I'm constantly the last to always get on my flights. They are constantly screaming my name in the airports because I just can't get to the airport early to wait. I absolutely hate waiting. So it's so difficult when I'm in this season of Advent and we're told to practice the spiritual discipline of waiting. But what Advent does to us and for us is that it is asking us in many ways to wait. And the question I've always struggled with, friends, is what are we waiting for? So while the main message of Advent is obviously waiting for the Messiah, Jesus, the Lord, who embodies much more than a baby who came into the world in swaddling clothes, we are waiting on the personification of justice, of freedom, of liberation, and the plethora of the things that our hearts are aiming for. And in this moment where our shared planet crumbles under the weight of human greed and exploitation, our neighbors are being snatched up by ICE, and money for jobs and education is being used to fund wars and genocide, it feels more relevant than ever, the waiting and the anticipation of a new world. So Isaiah, in one of his most fascinating and honestly perplexing prophecies I've heard, he's saying that the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with a young goat. And he goes on and even says that a child would put their hand in the hole of a serpent, but no one shall be hurt. And honestly, the first time I stumbled across this prophecy, I was shocked. I was like, Isaiah, I know that you've said a bunch of different things, some of them more outlandish than others, but this takes the crown. What does it mean that suddenly we are all friends and we're holding hands and singing Kumbaya? Historical enemies are suddenly eating from the same bowl. What does it mean? And what does it mean particularly that danger is almost non-existent? And for someone like me who has grown up with the weight of the state constantly against them as a black man in America, I could not just imagine what it means for power to be rethought of and rebalanced. But Isaiah is pointing us to a different future. And while this might seem whimsical in certain ways, and I still think it's kind of tough to swallow this pill that Isaiah is presenting, I believe there is some ancient wisdom to this. And Isaiah, under the inspiration of the Spirit, is pointing us to a future where power relations are balanced and violence does not have the final say. And the real question that I grapple with tonight is, what does it take for us to get there? Because if we don't know what it takes for us to get there, all this is but a dream. And I believe that we have a glimpse of the answer in the waiting. You see, the waiting that Advent requires of us demands that we engage the moral imagination in the creation of these new worlds. It requires that we get into our communities and do the work of organizing until we see change, no matter how incremental. The waiting of Advent, my friends, is not a passive, aimless twiddling of our thumbs, as some would suggest, but rather is a determined and an active spiritual discipline that is fighting for the rights over the future. The waiting of Advent is asking that who will have the final say about war and conflict. The waiting of Advent is asking that who will feed the hungry child in our streets. The waiting of Advent is asking that will there be a moment that none of us will die of preventable illnesses. The waiting of Advent is asking that when will they stop killing our prophets and our revolutionaries? Because, my friends, today I hear the voices of Chairman Fred screaming for freedom and liberation that has still not been realized. I hear the voice of Lumumba from the Congo asking that shall another African nation be impoverished by the United States and other powers? I hear the voices of those who have been taken away by ICE. I hear the voices of Black women who are more likely to die in childbirth than their counterparts. These are the voices of Advent. When will peace abound? And my friends, this is the battle that we are involved in as we wait. And as we wait, it's imperative that we do not lose hope and we do not give in to despair. Because the glorious thing about this wait that we're involved in is that Isaiah, who was prophesying into the future, assures us that the end is determined. That as sure as the sun rises and the waves of the sea return back, empire will never have the last word. That as sure as the sun rises, freedom and liberation will come. That as sure as the sun rises, we will enter a world where we will all be free. As sure as the sun rises, I hear the sound of freedom coming. So friends, in this moment, there might be confusion. There is chaos. There is a shadow of deep disappointment that rests upon our hearts, that rests upon the nation, and that rests upon the world. I have to admit. And there is fear, real, tangible fear for our lives and the lives of our siblings. And yet, the Spirit is saying we ought to wait actively. We ought to hold on to the promise of a future that is free. We ought to watch. We ought to be ready. We ought to refuse to give in to despair, even when it looks like we've lost at times. Even when they roll back our rights, cut our SNAP benefits, kill those who speak up. We have to refuse fear because we are assured that violence will never have the final word, and all empires will fall, and indeed we shall see the glory of the Lord. And even right now, I see the glory of the Lord rising upon us. I see a future where everyone is free, and I see true liberation. Thank you, friends. Thank you.